Once upon a time, people have discovered the grains. People have started culturing the grains and eating them. It was more specifically 12,000 years ago. Later, grains became so popular so that it became the main energy source of the humans. Several thousand years, the humans were eating the grains and nothing happened. Only in the last 50 years, people have made one big mistake, and that mistake associates with obesity. We get heavier and heavier and heavier. Worldwide, people, the scientists, were searching for the reason. What is the reason that we get overweight? Some people were saying the reason are the grains. We should not eat grains because it makes us as fat. Think about, can that be the reason that several thousand years grains don't make any problem, but only in the last 50 years, if you eat bread or grains, you get obese? Can that be? And they were saying, don't eat grains. Some other people were saying, oh, grain is no problem. Problem is wheat. Wheat has gluten and gluten is unhealthy. We should eat some other grains like oat or barley. And a lot of theories are generated over the last 50 years. Internet is full with diets, with food trends, and with a lot of information, half information, full information about the obesity. The fact is that we have today 1 billion people worldwide obese, and obesity increases. Now, even though we have a lot of information, especially in internet, obesity continues to grow. That means actually we can take all these theories and throw out. Nothing works and no one knows what is the reason for the obesity. However, grains associate with overweight and obesity. And what was the mistake, what we have done 50 years ago, which generates this obesity? I will answer this question in this video. My name is Dr. Kylie. I am a biotechnologist. I work 25 years in my own biotechnology company with human cells. What I did is following. I take cells from human body and put these cells in a small vessels. The cells look like this. And put the cells in small vessel and give them food. That means nutrients actually. And then, depending on the nutrients, I measure the reaction of the cell. I measure how long these cells can grow and if they die early or if I can prolong their life, if I can give them more energy or not. That is the experience what I have in the last 25 years. I will share my experience with you in many different videos. If you watch this video, I will answer the very simple question: how a simple grain can be your best friend or your enemy. I have a question to you. What do you think in this one tiny grain? How many nutrients are inside? 1, 10, 100, 1,000? The answer: several hundred nutrients are here inside. I have a second question. From those several hundred nutrients, how many of those we know and we can measure? Around only 80. 80 nutrients we can measure, we know, we have an idea about their function in the body, but several hundreds are still there and we don't know what they are. But we know they are inside. Why? We have very sensible machines in laboratory. We can inject samples from these grains on our analytical machines and we can see them, but we don't know what they are. For sure, all those nutrients have a function in our body, but we reduce everything to around 80 nutrients which we know and which we can measure. The question is, what kind of nutrients we have, we measure? Those are here. I have made take the nutrients which we can measure in small groups. Most of the people, especially in internet, speak about micronutrients. They are actually proteins, carbohydrates, and fats and fiber, etc. You hear most likely those nutrients all the time. But this tiny grain has also trace elements like iron, manganese, and copper and zinc, but also minerals like calcium, magnesium, phosphate, or amino acids, around 20 amino acids, where the protein will be built. And this tiny grain has all kind of vitamins, like vitamin A and K and C, etc. And the fats, you hear all the time about omega-3 fatty acids, but all other fats are also here inside. So, in summary, this tiny grain has several hundred nutrients, and we can measure only those routinely, and about those nutrients we have an idea what they make in our body. The rest of several hundred nutrients we don't know what they are, and we don't know what they do in our body. But one thing is for sure, they do also something in our body. Now, the question, if we have all these 60 nutrients, how they enter the cell and how the cell in our body can generate the energy of it. The one most important message I would like to give you with this video is the following. Here is our cell, and those are all the nutrients what we know. The cells can take all these nutrients all together in a pattern, not one after each other, no, all together, and metabolizes, that means eats, cell eats those nutrients all at the same time together. It is actually the same like when we go to a restaurant, we order a meal. For example, in meal they deliver salad and rice and then meat, and we eat all of them at the same time, right? We don't eat first. In the morning we eat meat, and in lunchtime we eat only salad, in the evening only rice. We don't do it. We eat all together in a meal, in a balanced way, right? If we do it so, why our cells should be different? The cells do exactly the same. All these nutrients will be taken in a pattern together so that the cell can produce maximal energy and can live for a long time. That is the one single important message what I would like to give you. Why it is so important? The reason is that the people make judgment about the food by focusing to only one single nutrient. For example, they say, oh, you need to eat a lot of oat because it has a lot of protein or fiber, or it has a lot of calcium or vitamin B6. It is impossible. Impossible. It is only possible if everything is well balanced and the cells can take it. Now, if we know those nutrients are necessary for the cell, the next question will be how much from each nutrient we should give to our cell. That means we should eat so that we have the maximal energy. That is a big question. Because that question is so important, several governments worldwide were working on this question over the decades, in the last 40 years. And the governments have made publications about every nutrient, how much we should take, what is the optimal range. It is not permitted to be too much, but also not too little. Just think about it. You eat your favorite food, you sit in a restaurant, your favorite food, they have put actually too much salt. You cannot eat it. Even if you eat, you don't feel good. Or they didn't give salt, or they gave very little salt. You cannot eat neither. The cells in our body is exactly the same. For every nutrient, what you see here, there is an optimal range. Only then the cell generates maximal energy and lives also very long. Now, about the optimal concentration of every nutrient, I told the governments made a lot of publications. Here, publications from United States, 40, 50 years ago, they have started. And we have Europeans in Germany, England, and Switzerland, and New Zealand, and Japan. All these governments worked and made publications about the optimal range. Now, why they make publication? Why there is not only one publication which is valid for worldwide? The reason is that these people, for example in America, they were believing for optimal concentration for certain nutrients, there is a different value than the Japanese people. I have read these publications. They are very similar, but they are not the same. That also shows that actually we don't know so really what is the optimal range of every nutrient. We just guess it. I have made an average value by taking all these publications and generated an average value so that it is globally valid for worldwide for everyone. Now, we have learned in one tiny grain there are several hundred nutrients and we can measure around 60 to 80 of them, and the governments publish for every nutrient how much we should take per day, what is the optimum. Now it would be interesting to compare how much we should take and how much a nutrient delivers on nutrients. From there we can understand if it is nutritious, if it is healthy or not. That is exactly what I have done. Now I will show you first the oat. It looks very complicated, but you don't need to focus to details. Just focus to this red field. This red field is the optimal range of every nutrient which is published with governments. That means that is the concentration what we should take when we eat something. And here are all the single nutrients. And you can see that some nutrients are in optimal range, some nutrients are too much. Too much is also detrimental, and some nutrients are too little. For example, by vitamins, some vitamins at all don't exist in oat, and some of them are too much. And from here, optically, we can immediately understand that maybe around half of the nutrients are in optimal range when you eat oat. And many of them are too little, some of them are too much. The question is now, is oat a superfood? People publish a lot. We should eat oat. We should not eat wheat because oat is superfood. It is healthy. Immediately you understand how healthy it is if it is superfood. Okay, I would say not superfood. And what about with the other grains? Maybe barley is a superfood. I have done that analysis as well. Here I have the barley. And you can see the same picture actually. Some of the nutrients are in optimal range in this window. Some of them maybe a little bit too much and many of them are too little. Is barley now more healthy than oat? You cannot say. No, impossible. And now I come to the most controversially discussed grain, that is the wheat. People say, oh, don't eat wheat because it is unhealthy. Let's look how unhealthy it is. That is the wheat. Do you see a different picture? Actually not. More or less they are all the same. Now I come to an emotional topic. Emotional topic therefore because I hear it almost every day, especially in the internet. The terminology is superfood. People define some food as superfood and they recommend to consume it. But how do they do it? Have you ever asked the question, how do you define that a food can be a superfood? Tomorrow, for example, avocado is defined as superfood. The day after tomorrow, maybe salmon is defined as superfood. And today is maybe oat is defined as superfood. And after a couple of weeks or months, they change also the sequence. And very suddenly, oat is not a superfood anymore, and maybe apple is superfood. Why it is the case? Why do people constantly change it? What is the reason for it? The reason for defining a food as superfood is that the people focus to only 1 or 2 or 5 different nutrients. For example, by oat, People focus to fiber. They say we should eat a lot of oat because it has a lot of fiber or it has a lot of protein. That is true, that are in optimal range. And it has, I don't know, very nice vitamin B3 concentration. Yes, it is true. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different nutrients, and based on 5 different nutrients, people make a definition about oat that it is a superfood. But I told you a couple of minutes ago that our cells cannot take 2, 3, 4, 5 nutrients, and they can take only if all the nutrients are together in a pattern. Therefore, if you eat oat and there are some other vitamins or minerals or trace elements are missing, you can still not get maximal energy. And therefore, the terminology of superfood doesn't exist in nature. And that is the reason why the people constantly change. Well, today is one food is superfood and tomorrow is another superfood. There are always these limited thinking and limited concentration to 3, 4 nutrients. That is a big mistake which is made in internet all the time. From cell biology perspective, superfood can only be if all the nutrients are in this optimal window. And none of the foods in world have all the nutrients in optimum. Now we have learned there is no superfood. However, there must be a possibility actually to compare different foods with each other just to get an idea which of them has more, which of them has less nutrients. How can we compare it? I have made following that are all the nutrients what we need, and I have made small groups, for example minerals. I compare the minerals between the grains, or I compare the vitamins between the grains, and I can say this grain has more vitamin than the other one. This would be possible. That is exactly what I have done. Now I would like to show you a more differentiated look into the grains so that you get more impression. If you would like to have more vitamins, which grain you should eat. If you would like to have more protein, which grain you should eat. That is what I have done. I am going to show. Now, let's start with minerals. Minerals means actually, that is the group, potassium, calcium, magnesium and phosphate. Here, that are the grains, wheat and rye, oat and white rice and buckwheat and barley. When I compare those, actually there is no big difference. More or less they are all the same. There is one aspect where we see big difference. Rice, white rice, that is the peeled white rice, or rice with skin. Here we see around 400% difference in mineral content. The minerals are in the skin of the grain. If you take out the skin of the grain, you have actually very little minerals inside. That is the key message. Here is the same. Whole grain wheat flour, and that is the white wheat flour. And you see again 300% difference on minerals. What about with the next group? That are the trace elements. Trace elements are very important for enzymatic reaction in body, in the cell. And their concentration is normally very low, but without trace elements we would die. In long term we would die. We need them. Trace elements are in the group iron, zinc, copper, manganese and fluoride. And here you see this always the same picture between wheat, rye, oat, white rice and buckwheat and barley. More or less no big difference. Big difference you see if you have rice which is peeled, and that is the rice peeled, and dark rice, and you see here 200%, 250% more trace elements are if you don't peel the rice. The same here. Whole grain wheat has 9, and wheat with white flour has 2. That means also 400%. 400% more trace elements you eat if you have wheat which is not peeled, whole grain wheat. Let's move to vitamins. I think I don't need to explain how important are vitamins. I have build a group of the vitamins that are all the known vitamins like vitamin A, B1, B2, blah, 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 and vitamin D, E, all together. And what we see, the picture don't change. Here, whole grain wheat, and that is the wheat of white flour of the wheat. You see 700% more vitamins are in whole grain wheat. And here it is the same. Rice, which is peeled, and dark rice with the skin. You have 400% more vitamins if you don't peel the rice. The opposite, between wheat, rye, oat, and rice and buckwheat, there is no big difference. Doesn't matter which of them you eat, more or less you get the same amount of vitamins. That is the key message. Energy. Actually, in terms of energy, they are more or less all the same. There are, of course, 10%, 15% difference on energy, but I would not overestimate. Go to the carbohydrate. In carbohydrates, important, we have the lowest carbohydrate content in oat and the highest carbohydrate content in white rice. Why? Because white rice or white flour of wheat, it is more or less only carbohydrate. If you take out the skin, there, what is left then? It is only carbohydrate and very little protein inside. And let's move to the fat. By fat, I was surprised. There is one grain which has high fat content. That is the oat. Oat has 7% fat, and we also know it actually from our normal life. If you buy rolled oat, after a couple of months in shelf, it gets bitter, and the taste gets bitter, and also smells a little bit strange. And that is the fat what oat has, and that fat is actually very healthy, unsaturated fat that gets oxidized, and then we get this bitter taste. So, in terms of fat, the other grains, forget it, it is not significant difference. Fiber. Fiber is important for our gut health. And what we see here is if you get white flour of wheat or whole grain wheat, you have 400% difference on fiber. Fiber is the food of the bacteria in our gut. Very important. The same we see here also, 300% difference between white rice and dark rice. Sugar, I would not overestimate, there is no big difference. And protein. Many people are crazy for protein. They would like to eat more protein. I will make an extra video about protein, how protein can kill us in long term. But it is not the topic today. I show you because most of the people are interested in protein. There is not very big difference in proteins between the grains. Now, I have shown different categories, the minerals, the trace elements, the vitamins, etc. If you would like to have overall picture about all the nutrients between the grains, how can we compare it? Okay, I understood that some grains have more vitamins, it's fine, but vitamin is only one group of nutrients. I would like to have an overall picture, and immediately I will tell you that is more healthy than the other one. And that is made in another way of calculation with balance factor. That means how well are all nutrients balanced so that all together will be delivered to our cells in a balanced way. And that is the terminology that I introduced, nutrient balance, and considering all the nutrients. Here you can see immediately, that is actually the most important diagram, what we should take home. If you eat grain, doesn't matter, bread or grain or whatever, which is made from white flour, you get 51% of all nutrients what you should take in that meal to your body. If you eat whole grain bread, you get 70% of all nutrients what you should take in that meal. That means you have 50% more nutrients are in optimal range in whole grain. Here, between the grains, the difference is not significant. It really doesn't matter if you eat wheat or spelt or rye or oat or rice or I don't know. They are more or less the same. The only difference is if you peel and take out the skin, you take out 50% of your all nutrients. And now I will answer you the question which I asked in the beginning of the presentation. What was it? Which mistake we have done 50 years ago so that we have started getting fatter, heavier and heavier? The answer: we have started peeling our grains around 50 years ago. That's it. If you peel the grains, you have full energy, you take full energy, but you take less nutrients. Because some nutrients are missing in our body gives us constant signal that we need to eat something to compensate the missing nutrients. We get constantly hungry and we eat constantly wrong food, constantly white flour, and we get heavier and heavier. That is the answer.